Hi there, everyone. Today we're going to talk about a really popular topic, and that is the road to CEO. I did a poll recently, and I was really surprised that 62% of respondents said that CEO or general manager was the goal for their career. So I thought, why not speak to someone, my friend Karen, who does that role, and get her to share her tips and tricks and experiences, so you can really understand the road to CEO and what that path looks like. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rich. I'm also a CEO and co-founder. One of the businesses I co-founded is MoveMeOn.com. We provide unique career guidance for people coming from a professional services background primarily. So if you don't know the platform, it's a free to use platform at MoveMeOn.com, and you can go check it out. So that's me. I'm going to hand over to Karen and she can introduce herself. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me. I'm Karen Hilson. So I'm CEO of Heycar in the UK market. We are a marketplace and classifieds business for used cars. And I've been with the business since it was founded. So interesting from a kind of startup point of view, it was a corporate backed venture. I guess founded and incubated by Boston Consulting Group's digital ventures arm, and then handed over to me and a few others to run it for real, so to speak. So prior to that, I was in the startup world for 6 or 7 years prior to that, generally in sort of Series A, Series B, and have always sort of taken the role of first grown up, so to speak. So sort of, raised a bit of cash, need a bit of structure. And prior to that, I spent sort of 10 plus years in corporate world where I guess I've learned some of that structure and process stuff.
I love the first growing up, creating some order out of the early chaos. And it's actually great to hear about a successful corporate venturing. I had a conversation earlier this week about the sort of graveyard of corporate ventures and how corporate ventures potentially struggle to become successful. So maybe we can dig into that. So I've got a set of questions, Karen. I was going to kick off with what are the character traits that people need to have as a CEO? As I said, 62% of people said they wanted to be one, but CEO is a tough job, I'd imagine. So what do you think people need in order to do it really well and thrive?
I think it's a really interesting one. And I think the almost film and the arts hasn't helped, because if you look at any film that is based on a business, the CEO role is ranges from anything between utterly glamorous to kind of psychopathic, and kind of there tends to be no middle ground. I'm sort of a big believer in you can do it your way and be authentically you. In terms of the skills you need, I think it's a really interesting blend. I think certainly from my point of view, you have to be really resilient, and there's a difference between kind of like being tough and being able to kind of have tough conversations. There's a resilience level to the kind of the roller coaster of a day, where your day can go. You can set your day up and think, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then 3 grenades fly in, and suddenly you're completely off course. I guess, the resilience to be able to kind of stay calm, cope with it, not let your emotions get the better of you. And ultimately the people that are kind of coming to you in those circumstances are looking for advice and a decision. So I think resilience is a really big thing. It's interesting, if you go back to kind of the film conception of kind of what a CEO is, you have to be a really good listener. So I often find myself as the quiet person in the room that is trying to read what's going on in the room that's not being said. And it's hard because I'm an extrovert. So I want to talk and I want to get involved, and I have to force myself to kind of sit back. So great listener, and really kind of training yourself to be a good listener and spotting what's really going on in the room and working out how you're going to pick into it. And then I think particularly within the startup scale up phase, comfortable with ambiguity. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that, there's a reason that the business you founded is founded because someone hasn't solved it yet, or you're going to try and solve it in a better way. And I guess hand in hand with that kind of comfortable with ambiguity is not particularly articulate, but a bit of a have a go mentality. Mm-hmm. You kind of have to have enough sort of bravery pants to kind of go, let's have a go and let's see what happens.
Try and fail.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think it's overused now, this whole like, fail fast and stuff. There are many, one of the phrases I use often in the business is like, okay, remove all the constraints. What would you do? What would you do if it was your own money? And then you often get a completely different answer out of people. I was like, okay, well, why aren't we doing that? Well, yeah, but it's like, no. If that's the thing that you believe is the right thing to do, what will give you the confidence to go for it?
So some really great things there, and I'm going to pick up on a whole bunch of them. Something you said at the start was the kind of grenades that go into your day. So I think people will be really interested to understand, what is a typical day? What's a typical week? What's a typical month? What's your kind of CEO rhythm, if you have one, perhaps with the team, perhaps with your senior team, perhaps with the board, investors, anything you can share there?
Yeah, so I think I'm a big believer in, time is finite. So you have to control your own diary. Otherwise, people will control it for you.
Do you have an assistant who kind of helps with that one?
No, I'm far too much of a control freak. That's a lie. I have someone that kind of checks my diary for clashes once a week and kind of moves a few things around. But, I book all my own meetings. I generally shimmy things around. Again, purely down to my own control freak nature, to be honest. But there's Heycar's 3 years old, so we're still a monthly operating business. We're not kind of a quarterly annual maturity kind of yet. So for me, there's always been a case of, if it's not done by the last week of the month, it's not going to happen anyway. So I use that to set up my next month. And from a time horizon point of view, to be frank, I'm probably never looking more than 3 months ahead, because the pace of change in the business is, I could write a 2025 strategy now, but chances are I'm ripping up in June.
Yeah.
So I've always had kind of a really kind of strict weekly cadence of, I like to see all my frontline team once a week. I used to make the mistake. I used to think I need to see them all on a Monday, because, but that's, the start of the week, and I need to be the cheerleader that gets them all going. And then you obviously realize that you get to a certain level where, but these people are self-motivated, intelligent people that, regardless of whether they have a call with me on a weekly basis, will do a good job anyway. So tend to spread them out over the week. Quarterly board meeting, kind of check-ins with board members outside of that. And I think from a cultural point of view, as I said, as an extrovert, I also have a reasonably short attention span. I'm not very tolerant of pointless meetings. Therefore, I tried to set an example by not creating too many either. So we have a weekly all hands. It's 25 minutes, but we're really transparent about the performance of the business. It's going well, high fives and back slaps. If it's not going so well, what are we going to do about it? What are we doing like this afternoon to kind of make a change?
Yeah. So you're a big fan of the sort of monthly audit and delete of meetings. It's amazing how they grow legs, right?
Crazy.
And the attendance of meetings, suddenly explodes.
Yeah. Or the one that everyone moans about, but no one's put their hand up to say, like, should we just can it then? Because none of us want to go anymore.
So we started off by saying, what are the skills? What are the traits of a CEO? And I think you sort of touched on a few challenges. So like, you need to be super resilient. You're juggling things, diary can get out of control, whatever. What about like the best bits? So like, what excites you? What makes you proud? What are the best bits about the job?
I think it's the moments where you see members of the wider business with that kind of like light in their eyes. So I had 2 examples yesterday in the office in London, really busy day in the office. Everybody was in. Month end, so our e-commerce team were like desperately trying to hit a target. So every 10 minutes you had the bell going off and kind of cheers through the office, and you kind of get this kind of lift of like, oh, it feels good, it feels like a month end. And then one of my trading team kind of had a bit of an epiphany idea, and just you could see he just got the bit between his teeth over it. And I saw him sort of like wandering around the business, almost like pitching it to everyone that he could find. And he was sort of like following me around me. He's like, I've got something here. It's going to revolutionize. And it's those conversations you're like, right, well, let's make a cup of tea and let's sit down then, because this sounds exciting. They're the bits that I get the most out of. It's that when you see the buzz and the light in other people of, God, they like are having a good time here. And this isn't just a job. There's a kind of spirit and a passion in it. And that's not to say not everyone in your organization can have that, right? You have to accept that some people are just coming to work to earn a living and go home again. But I guess to be succinct, it's kind of when you see others winning or feeling winning, and that's the bit that you kind of go, oh, today was a good day.
Yeah, no, I can really empathize with that, particularly as an organization goes from, you said you work with some earlier stage startups, where in my experience, you kind of know everyone in the room, you can almost have an eye on everything, and you get to a certain scale and stage and you can't, right? And you have to be able to empower people and let them run with stuff, and seeing those people, mature and create big wins for the business is incredibly gratifying. Going back to kind of routine, something that strikes me, CEO role potentially always on. How do you balance, home life with work life?
Yeah, it's a good. So I think I had a bit of so up until last summer, I have been fairly devout in my views on, I get 6 weeks holiday a year and I'm on holiday. And I don't get emails on holiday, and I'm not contactable. And there was probably a realization when I took this job on that was like, oh, maybe I need to like relook at that a little bit. So we went on holiday and I did check my emails every 2 or 3 days. Not just, not because I needed to, not because everyone was waiting for a response. So I think it was more just of a kind of like, is everything okay? Everything looks okay, fine. I'm just going to go back to the beach. I think from a sort of day point of view, I guess I've done quite a lot of work on me over the years to kind of work out, how do I get the best out of me? When am I at my best? When am I at my worst? And I think we've all been in different jobs where you're really happy or you're miserable, or you're really productive, or you're wading through treacle. And I remember reading a book years ago about the fact that your brain is essentially a battery. So by the end of the day, your cognitive load is kind of worn down. I know I'm best in the mornings, so I quite like to get up in the mornings, get a few bits done in the mornings. I get kind of big problems solved in the morning, and this is not kind of I get up at 5 a.m, have a hot water with a slice of lemon, do 100 push-ups. I wander downstairs, make a cup of coffee, and kind of write on a piece of paper the thing I need to solve. And I log off at a reasonable time on the basis that anything I do past 6:30 is probably not going to be my best work. Yeah. And I think, I'm really fortunate in Heycut. You talked at the start about, I guess, generalists. One of the things I've observed in startups over the years, from VC funded to kind of early stage kind of scale ups, I've always seen greater success with hiring fewer, better people. So right. From Heycar's point of view, we hired fewer, better generalist people early on, because in the early days, you need people to just get their hands dirty and be learning how to set up a CRM one day and out on the road pitching a customer the next day. And you need the people that get excited about all of that.
Solving all those problems and opportunities.
Yeah, and it's I guess it's an old cliche, but if you hire a really good team, then you don't have to work kind of 16 hours a day, because you should be kind of pushing the people in the right direction that have the right mindset and attitude to solve it. And also I'd probably suggest that if people are having to work 16 hours a day, there's a part of your role which is helping them deprioritize, right? We're probably not focused enough at that point. Yeah, I think the only thing that's changed over the years is I think possibly a COVID thing as well. I probably do an hour's work on a Sunday now just to set my week up. I just sleep better on a Sunday night. Yeah. And if it's a case of I miss a tea time on a Sunday with my daughter every now and then just to get my head straight, it's kind of worth it. Yeah, it's about controlling, I think, what works for you. And again, I've done a lot of polling data around how people behave when they're on annual leave and weekends and stuff. And it's horses for courses. Some people actually much prefer to do a little bit on Sunday to set up their week for success. They find that creates a lot of efficiency in the week, and then they can take their time with family or exercise, etc. And we started to talk a little bit, or you started to talk about joining a kind of startup scale-up environment. I'm interested. So, a lot of people want to move into startups and scale-ups, perhaps from a more generalist background, consulting, other professional services, maybe a corporate.
what are your top tips for making that move?
So I'll be fully transparent. So I left corporate world and joined a startup and hated my first 3 months. The reason for that was I was sort of like mid to senior level manager in a corporate, and I joined an early stage startup because I wanted the like thrill of entrepreneurship and I wanted to be in at the coalface. And I think my ego took a denting, really, because I'd been the person that had signed things off. And then I found myself in this business that used G Suite, which was highly collaborative. And now every deck I wrote had like 1,500 comments on it. And I'm like, well, I'm not used to this. Like, I'm usually the person that leaves the comments. So I had a sort of like rough first 3 months. I almost had to kind of realign my mindset a little bit in terms of this is a different world and it operates differently. And then once I sort of got through that, actually I started to thrive. But I think it was a bigger cultural adjustment than I expected. And I think I've seen it a lot with hires that we've made at Heycart. There's a couple of bits that play out, which is, we've deliberately hired, smart generalists, which is my kind of term for, someone that will, equally write an Excel model, do a deck, pick up the phone and speak to a customer. And sometimes they struggle with the fact that they have to do a bit of grunt work. There might be some data formatting to do because we just need to get this thing out into a mail merge, and there's only 20 of us in a room, so one of us is going to be doing it, and it will be me or you or whoever, and it will be different on one day to the next. So there's definitely that sort of like the grunty work bit. I think the other thing that I've seen quite a few times is people often join a startup because they want that autonomy. So they want that removal of corporate thinking and frameworks, and I'd say there's about a 50-50 hit rate for me. You give someone a blank piece of paper and say, well, you scribe it, you tell me how it's going to work. 50% of the people that you hire are absolutely galvanized by it. Like, it's the most exciting thing ever. And the other 50 are paralyzed by it. Because it's like, well, no, like, where are my guide rails? Where do I start? It's like, well, no, like, we could do anything. So that, yes, I think a bit of grunt work, a really kind of self-diagnosis of, are you really ready for that level of ambiguity and kind of the willingness to kind of completely remove all the shackles of corporate life. I think the other thing, and I'm never sure whether this is fair to say or not, but and I think this is, move me on to kind of territory of, I guess, professional services consulting into startup world. You need to be able to talk to normal people. And by that, I mean, you need your strategy manager, head of strategy, whoever you've hired in that capacity, perhaps from a professional services organization, to be able to sit down with your entry-level customer service executive or your account executive and explain why we're doing something, what we're expecting from it. And I've seen it in a few businesses now where you have this kind of highly intellectual individual that when you ask them to kind of talk at different levels and get understanding, it's quite a challenge.
Yeah, and I think underpinning that sometimes is going back to being humble. I remember when I was a consultant, the culture just seemed to be one of having to impress clients, right? So you're always very polished and, I think somewhat arrogant is fair to say. And I think the startup scale-up world, and particularly when you're having to talk to different types of people, humility goes a long way. And on the grunt work, I think that's kind of a similar thread. One of my observations is who is just willing to take out the bin. So in our office, particularly post-COVID, we don't have a big corporate office where a cleaner's zooming around every day. We have some bins, and if they're full, one of us needs to run it down to the recycling center. Yeah. I totally kind of second that. And obviously you've now progressed your career to CEO, and as I said, 62% of people who did my poll said that's where they want to end up. It's an amazing achievement, by the way, and as a father of 2 daughters, it's also great to see another female CEO in the tech scene. Any like top tips? Is there any like silver bullet?
Oh God, I wish there was. So I guess I was lucky. So I had a 6-month transition period with my predecessor. So we had loads of time to go through things. And I remember, once we'd started talking about the transition of roles, I'd written a massive list of all the things that I needed to do. I'd been through the MBA books, and I need to know this, I need to know this, I need to know this. And then, I sort of had this sort of like dawning kind of moment when we were sitting down talking about things. He was like, yeah, I don't really look at that. And I, when a finance director will do that, you probably just need to ask these questions. And it sort of suddenly dawned on me that all of this imposter syndrome that was in me, that like, I need to do this, and I need to be an expert in double entry bookkeeping, and I need to do this, and I need to, fully understand all the ins and outs of our P&L and our corporate governance model and everything. And then you sort of just realize that you sort of just work it out, and hopefully there's the right people to guide you. And if in doubt, Google it. You sort of like the number of times where I'm just going to Google that, and then you sort of look at it, you're like, I'm not the first. So,
do you have any kind of mentors? I don't hugely like the term, but folks in similar roles that you have a glass of wine with and chew the fat.
Yeah, there's definitely I've probably got a black book of sort of 5 people where you kind of think, oh, there's this thing and I need to kind of bounce it off someone. So like I was at Nested before with Matt Robinson. So ever so often I'll kind of just drop Matt a sort of late night emails like, if you had this problem and you were thinking about how would you look at it? Yeah, it's just kind of, but also kind of having people within your sort of network group that are different to you. So I can be quite logical and rational in my mindset. Therefore, I kind of need people that are a bit different to me to challenge my thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. You're facing similar problems, but people come at it from a different mindset.
Yeah.
A couple of closing questions, quick fire ones. Anything you really miss from corporate, larger company, non-startup, scale-up tech world?
Like sitting in a canteen and having a lunch. It feels like one of those things now when I go back to corporate businesses, I was like, that was a thing for about 10 years. I would go and have lunch and I would sit in a restaurant and chat to people about what they were doing. And I probably never appreciated it at the time. And there are definitely days when you sort of think, oh, that sort of mid-level role that pays you about 50 grand that has very little accountability and responsibility. There are definitely days where you sort of go, it's quite attractive actually. And then for 10 minutes later, you're like, I'd be bored stupid within a week. But yeah, I think I do look back actually, and there's a group of us that were all graduates together on the same graduate scheme. And you think about the things that we used to stress out about at 24 and you realize, God, they were nothing.
I also think when you're in a large organization, you don't quite appreciate the corporate infrastructure that's around you. So, friends who work for bigger businesses who are, ringing IT support and, new computers arrive and all this kind of stuff, which, you really have to become quite a big business to kind of build and justify. And yeah, so if you're in a bigger company at the moment, don't overlook the efforts made by all those service centers.
And also like lap up the training. I probably left my corporate career incredibly well trained. I'd never sacked anyone. And I went into my first startup and, had to do a fair bit of it quite quickly. But I had the skills, I just never exercised them. So I think that's the other thing, kind of make the most of the L&D, because it's different in startup world. You sort of, you learn by doing.
So that's a beautiful segue onto my closing question, which is, I don't know if you knew you were making that segue, but you have. Favorite resources. So nowadays we're blessed, right? There's, free learning everywhere, be that podcasts, books, book summaries, blog posts. Is there anything that you use or particularly recommend?
So I've got one favorite book that I think everyone should read, and I've read it multiple times, which is Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's brilliant. And, whenever you've got an issue with a team, an organization, etc., you can look at that pyramid that he uses as a model and kind of go, okay, we've got a trust issue. That's where our problem is. And that's always the book that is on the bookshelf. It's the one that I recommend to anyone. Whenever someone gets a new job, I'm like, read this, just read it. And then I think I'm really boring. I really like the Diary of a CEO stuff. I find Stephen Bartlett a little bit saccharine at times. But he had some really
zillion people do his podcast.
Yeah, it's sort of like, but I kind of appreciate a good conversation. And actually, my way of de-stressing is to go to the gym and lift heavy things. or run on a treadmill. So actually I'm much better at listening to spoken word, and actually, you know, someone that's done something in a sporting environment or a business environment for me is always like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the old school Desert Island Discs. You know, and I think the thing is about business people on Desert Island Discs is you get the whole life story. So they're not just talking about the business piece. So I particularly enjoy that. Very, very similar.
Yep.
Just dates back kind of 80 years, I guess. Karen, I'm going to call it quits. I don't want to take up more of your afternoon. But big thank you for joining me. I think it's been super helpful to understand how to get to CEO, the kind of pluses and minus, pros and cons, and, you know, wishing you all the success with Heycar and your future there and the rest of your career.
Thank you for having me on.
And just to close, if people want to obviously watch more of these conversations, you can subscribe to this channel. If you want to hear more about what I've got to talk about, the best place to head is over to LinkedIn. You'll find me. My name is Richard Rosser. I can probably drop a link in the comments. And if you're not a user of Move Me On, it's a free to join platform used by 100,000 people globally. Just head over to movemeon.com and check it out.